Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to you on this Wednesday afternoon. My name's Kyron. I work in the technical sales department of our headquarters here in Renningen in the south of Germany. Today, we are going through a little bit of a new topic for everyone, or something a little bit different than what we usually do. So, very warm welcome to you all, as I said before. It's going to be a specific topic. So, we're going to not focus on the basics. We're going to go into a very specific details on the situation where you can put PE plates or stones underneath the substructure, not the substructure, sorry, the substrate of your building roof, and how you can use this to your advantage to potentially avoid placing excess ballast. If you haven't joined us before, we have a little poll that we've signed up, or we've just started, I should say. If you haven't answered that, could you please do so? It just helps us provide a little bit more information for who we're talking to today, which is you, and hopefully we can tailor that information and make it a little bit better and clearer. So that would be one thing we just want to start off with. I see most of some of the questions have been answered already, but yeah, if you can fill that, would be great. On the other side of things, we also have a Q&A section of your Zoom function. So somewhere down here, you should see a Q&A or F&A or whatever language your Zoom setting is, somewhere where you can ask questions. If you do have any questions today, we would love to hear them, but just please ensure you put them in there, because we, Roman and myself, who I'll introduce shortly, can answer those questions directly, and it saves everyone scrolling up and down through the chat. So I did just mention Roman. I think I can see you camera on as well. Maybe a quick introduction from you. Hi again, good to see you.
Hi
What do you have for
everyone.
us today?
Hi everyone from my side. Thanks, Kyron, for the introduction. I'm pretty sure a lot of people were here last week. I don't have to say much, I guess. I will assisting Kyron online. I will be here doing the calculation later. We'll show you where to find some information on the assembly instruction. As Kyron mentioned, we're going to do it a bit different today. We are not going through all the main process, but it's still important to show some facts. Then we're going to do the planning at the end. Before that, Karen said that we're here to answer all the questions. I will be dropping out soon. Karen can start now with the parts and the setup and everything. But so far, if you have questions, don't worry, I will be in the back answering as good as I can. And if there are open questions, we might have time at the end. Let's see how that goes. All right, I think that's it from my side. Karen, give it
Oh, hey,
started.
thank you, Roman. So some of you may already know, well, hopefully you do. That's why you're here and looking for more information. But what we want to bring today is a topic that has been used for a couple of years now, I would say, in Switzerland specifically, but it's sort of now been opened up into our wider audience across Europe. And the general idea is that for certain roof types, specifically gravel and green roofs, there is excess material that's already seen on the roof, usually in a 5 or 10 centimeter chunk, which could act as ballast. And using a slightly different way of fixing the material that we have than what we usually do, we can utilize that material in a way so it is now also the ballast that's required. And there's a few ways of doing that, and they're not all, but they're a little bit more suited for the different roof types. So Roman might go through, or will go through that in a little bit more detail later on. But we have two main variations, and one of them is with what we would say a big PE plate. So this is the one of two options. This is a larger one. We have some samples in front of me as well. And the idea is, instead of putting our rails on our mat S, we actually just screw it into this, and the material that sits on top of the roof, whether it be gravel or whether it be substrate, sits on top and acts as a weight. And we'll just jump to camera now, and this is just a small scale sample that we have. Most of the material that you see in front of you probably already know. So we have our basic rail that sits in the middle, and we have our peaks and our SDs. These are fixed the same way as they usually are. So with the MK2. On that point, I should note that this is only possible for the classic variations. So the express version that we have for the S-dome and the D-dome, that's not possible in this case. And it makes sense, because you want this for a special construction, and the express system is a system that's more designed for speed of installation, but it's not going to be suitable in this case because you're trying to achieve something a little bit different. What's different to this than what you would know with the usual version, there is no mat S. So usually your mat S will sit here and your mat S will sit here, but instead now we are screwing directly into the sheeting. And so you can see the screws that are just under here into the peaks of the trapezoidal. And this is now a secure fixing between the rail, and the system as itself is, instead of being placed sort of on top of the roof, it's placed on the bottom level of the roof, and then material is going to be placed on top. So standard practice, we would consider mat S, rail, ballast. In this case, we're actually fixing our rail to the, let's say, the plate underneath, and the ballast is going to sit on top. And when I say ballast, it doesn't necessarily have to be stones. It could be the gravel that is sitting on top. It could be the green roof that is sitting on top. Depending on the material and the density of the material, this plate now represents a certain amount of ballast, or a certain number of kilograms, which will sit on top. And this saves you then from having to put extra material on top, like actual ballast stones, what we would usually put, because this weight is being made up from the side. So we're able to also calculate this in base as well, because usually you'll have an idea already of how much material is sitting on top and a density of that material. And so whether it's gravel, which I think is usually about 1.5 tons per cubic meter, we know the area of this mat, we know the thickness of it, so we have a volume of gravel. We can then calculate a rough equivalent of how much ballast or how much weight this one mat represents. All right, so one thing we should probably note, I've mentioned before, or I mentioned quickly before, that this is a green roof and for the gravel roof as well. And I think it's probably a very good point to mention, and maybe we go too much further. And sometimes it sounds obvious, but it's actually, we get this question more often than probably would like. This is possible with the green roof, with the stones, I should say as well. However, green roofs that has plant life on it, plant needs sun, and the PV panels need sun to function. You can't really have both functioning at 100%. So if you are using a green roof and you want to use one of the systems that we have here, it is going to be obviously at the detriment to the plant life that's underneath. So we do actually have another system that's probably coming out later this year, which we'll talk about on a different date. But while this is practically possible, it's not necessarily good for the existing plant life that's on the roof if you have a green roof. Gravel, obviously different. The stones don't need that much sun, but with the plant life, it's an important thing to know. And it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many times we get this request or this question, and even sometimes after the installation, it comes through where people are not happy that all their plants have died. So that's an important point to note. I've shown the P option, and the other one we have is somewhat similar, but with ballast stones. And this one doesn't, I would say, doesn't utilize the weight of the material as much, but does in a slightly different way. So in this case, yeah, thanks, Klaus. We're actually going to use the ballast stones that we would generally recommend for putting on top of the rail. We're going to put them underneath the rail. All right. So there's a few things that you want to consider on here. The concrete's a little bit rough. And so if you have usually the case, you'll have a membrane and then some green roof material or some ballast on top. The membrane can be susceptible to damage. So if you are using this, you've got to be quite careful about not scratching or damaging the membrane by putting these concrete blocks on top, because they are quite coarse, and concrete is quite easy to move around. You can hear this though, it's pretty rough. And you don't want to damage that membrane. But the idea is much the same with the PE plates. If you have gravel or the green roof, it's just going to sit at a rough height, whatever height that is, whether it's 80 mil, 10, 100 mil, 120 mil. And you can then either place these blocks just directly on top of this gravel. You can dig into the gravel and place them down. If it's a new roof, you might just want to place the blocks down and place the gravel around it. And in this case, the gravel is not sitting on top as such, but it is going to nestle around it and hold it in place. And if you think about it in a different way, sort of train tracks, for example, are held from gravel. And if the gravel is vibrated or nestled correctly, it actually provides a really firm base for these concrete blocks to sit in. The concrete blocks are connected a little bit different to the other with the P plates. I'm going to flip it over as well. So they're just different screws. So the process is much the same, I should say. They're just different screws, and I'll show these screws in a moment. These are from Hiko, I believe. But maybe Roman will correct me on that later. But it's a multi-monty screw, which is designed for concrete and is a very strong screw. They use this for all sorts of different concrete fixations. I had one here a moment ago, which I think I have just misplaced. And here is the screw we use for this. And we use different versions of this screw, longer versions for the larger systems we use. So the ground mounted system and the tilt up bento system as well use something similar, whereby you have much larger forces on the screws. They come in longer versions though. In this case, this is just the 35 mil one. However, this screw is extremely strong, to be honest, and some might say even overkill for the situation that we are using it. Just to compare it to the other one, and this is for the P plate. The screw is a little bit different. This just goes through the rails as well, but sits into the P plate, which I showed before. What's maybe an important comment here as well is that the rails that we have for both these systems are just our standard basic rails. So there is no there's no pre-drilled holes in them as well. This is something that you're going to have to do on site. It's something that might sound a bit concerning at first. However, it is suitable for this situation, and it's part of sort of our standard following the guidelines and the assembly instructions. It's part of the standard terms and conditions and warranty that we offer. We have here the samples of the S-dome, the one-sided system, but this is possible for both the S-dome and the D-dome in both the Classic and the Classic LS. And similar to all of the things that we have in base, you're only going to get given the option that's possible. So if you are working through the process in base and you get to a point and you want this, and you can't see it, it might be because you've got the wrong roof type, or it might be because you've made a selection about the wrong product as well. So you have to just be careful about what the roof type you're choosing, whether it be the gravel or the green roof, and also the system that you're using. It has to be the Classic or the Classic LS. There is options in certain cases where you can use more ballast on top of this. I haven't had enough situations where I'm using it in terms of working with the customers to know how often that is, but there is the option of using that existing ballast process that we have. So the speed porters and the porters, which sit on top as well. However, the general idea is we take, and this is in both cases, we take the ballast that we'd usually put on top of the rail and we put it under, right? And just depending on the roof type and depending on the roof slope, it's just going to function a little bit different way. But in many cases, it can be advantageous because you're using the existing material that's already on the roof. And the other part is that on a cost side, it can also be advantageous because in this specific example, generally speaking, the ballast blocks are going to be quite a bit cheaper than the mat S that we are providing. With all of our other systems as well, where we don't provide the ballast themselves, so we don't provide the blocks, they would be something you'd have to get the PE plates that I spoke about before, they are something. And as with all of the programs, all of the projects that we have in base, you'll see this list of information on the output page or on the summary page at the end of the project. Roman, I've run myself out of breath, which I think means it's a good time to pass over to you. And maybe you can show where some of this information is shown on our website.
Yeah, that
But
is
also the
right.
base side of things, because I think there's a lot of important stuff or just subtle differences, but important differences, what's shown in base.
There is a few more things I want to add. I was thinking I will maybe add it while I'm showing the assembly instruction because that makes it easier for everyone to understand, especially since most of the people are quite new to this kind of systems. But I think you summarized it quite well. Um, it is special. Please keep in mind it all only works with the classic system. Karen said that before. And well, you can do the calculation. We will do this later in base without any troubles in K2 base, and you will get the report. But before that, we're gonna go have a look at the assembly instruction. I'm gonna share my screen, and I know people are kind of bored that we always show the assembly instructions, but I guess this is quite important. We are here back on the main K2 website right here, or also if you go to the catalog, which we always recommend going through the catalog, but you can always find it also through the resource center and the download library, and then you get into here, the flat roof, pitch roof systems, and so on. And once you're in the Dome 6 system, you can find the assembly instruction. If you scroll down a little bit, like here are the regular systems. And if you scroll down a little bit, you have the PE tiles or paving tiles, which is what I see the wrong translation right now, but that doesn't matter. So once you open this, you will get to have a look at the assembly instruction. And the assembly instruction is just an additional assembly to the main one. So that doesn't mean it's showing all the components and all the setup. It's just showing the additional parts, just like the PE plates and the concrete blocks. Here we have the first pictures on the beginning of the assembly instruction just to visualize it a little bit. So you can see here, this will be a roof where there will be gravel. It will be filled up with gravel. It's probably a new building or the roof was just done completely new. This one is where it's a bit of an older roof, filled up with gravel already. It's not new anymore, but it's done with the concrete blocks on the gravel. So what is important to know? Um, very important, Karen said that before, we have different systems which only work, like the PE blade only works for the gravel roof. The concrete blocks work for the gravel and for the green roof. Reason here is not only that the plants, they don't get enough sun and water. It's also that they will, if they grow, they will grow over the edges of the module. That's one point. And the second point is if you place it the way it is right here and you add some of the substrate, usually substrate has roots inside and everything, so it has to have a minimum thickness. For gravel, a regular thickness, it's usually around 4, 5, or 6 centimeters. And the minimum thickness for substrate is usually around 8 or 9 centimeter. Regular one is 10. That's what we usually count with. So if you would like to place PE plates on a green roof, make sure that the bottom corner, the bottom edge of your module is not digged in case you want to do this special request. Kyron mentioned that before, but it's just not suitable really. So what you should keep in mind, don't plan with PE plates on existing green roofs or even on new green roofs. You would have to use the concrete blocks. Second thing, and that's what we will see here, you will get a regular calculation in K2 base. This is what it looks like on a regular calculation with usually you have green and red squares with a number inside, which is the ballast you would have to place on. As you see, you have white blocks everywhere, and these white blocks are either the PE plates or the concrete blocks. What's important to know is that you will have to place from time to time more ballast onto the roof than you actually need. The reason for this is the span width of the basic rail, which means if you would have a regular system where you need a bit of ballast on the outer edges here, on the corners, and maybe a little bit on the inside, but nothing really completely in the center of the module block, that means you still have to place concrete blocks here because you cannot use the basic rail from this side and use a span width for more than 2 or 3 meters to the next concrete block. That means if you're planning to use this kind of system, you will have to make sure that the static of your building is strong enough because you will place more ballast stones than you might need. This is a very important fact you have to keep in mind. For the PE plates, it's nothing. You really place only the PE plates, and if it's very necessary, if it's on very high wind loady area or like on the coastal area, on the sea lake or whatever, then you might have to add some extra ballast. But usually you can place next to one PE plate, you can place another one if there will be more ballast needed. So you will get the report just like you can see it right now here, and we will see it later in base. But sometimes there's the squares that are red and there's still a number inside. If there's a number inside, that means still there is one concrete block or PE plate and you need additional ballast to it, which can be worked out with either extra concrete blocks or on top, or extra PE plates underneath the rail or blocks underneath the rail. So you're still always on the same level under the rail in general. Also, the setup of the blocks is important. You have here the example with the PE plates. And this is again with the span width. If you would, for example, not need any ballast on this position, you will still have to place a PE plate because the span width from this PE plate until the next one would be 3 to 4 meters, and the basic rail needs more support to sit on. And that's why we will have to place a PE plate here, just even if there's no need for ballast, if there's no need for a support. So there's two options. Either if you need a lot of ballast, you will have 3 PE plates as a standard, or if you need not that much, you will have minimum 2 PE plates under the SD dome as a minimum. You can see that here for the LS version, it's exactly the same. It doesn't change, but you will see it on the calculation side. Here we have, this is 1A and 1B, and we have the example where you get it out in the report. For example, here you will need on every peak and SD. This is like we had it in 1A. We will need it on every peak and SD. And in the middle part, it's enough to place only the PE plates or only the PE plates on every SD. So we'll skip always the peak itself. Very important. That's why you need to check exact where to place the PE plates. For the concrete blocks, well, here I forgot there are some photos how you can place additional ballast too. Either you add some more PE plates in the middle, or you place concrete blocks directly on the PE plate, or just on top of the ballast, on top of the gravel if that's still not enough. For the concrete blocks, it's not the same. Concrete blocks, as they are higher up, we have a higher bending phase, then you usually need, not usually, you always need a block on underneath the peaks as well. So you only have the version of concrete blocks under every SD dome, plus on top under the peaks. There is no other version. So you will get the calculation exactly this way. You will see every concrete block on every peak and SD. Plus, sometimes there's numbers in red where you need to add some extra ballast, which you can place in between the concrete blocks, or you use the regular methods, just like porter or speed porter. I think that's it for the assembly instruction. It's a bit, it's quite a lot for the beginning. So maybe you have a look yourself. You can find it, as I said, in the download library under the website or on the catalog as well once you go through the regular system. Um, yeah, so far so good. One more thing, I
Roman?
think, to visualize it. Yes, Karen, you can.
Sorry, I
No,
don't know
no,
where I
no
got you or not.
problem.
So we just had a question, which I think you were covering quite well there. So if you need more ballast
Yeah,
than what's equivalent, and I think you'll show it in base a little bit, but let's say
yeah,
one PE plate is equivalent to 20 kilograms of gravel.
yeah,
Uh, one option would be you could say to increase more gravel, like make an extra 2 or 3 centimeters of gravel.
yeah.
However, at that point, you're going to impact the module.
So the thing is why I mentioned that before with the PE blade and the height of the substrate, it's the same with the PE blade and the gravel. The PE blade is sitting directly on the surface of the roof, and you have around 7 centimeter until the bottom part of your module, which means if you add more gravel, you will have as an equivalent more weight for the PE blade, for each PE blade. If you still need more ballast, you add more PE blades, which is more surface to hold the rail down. And if that's still not enough, you can still add the regular methods, just like the porter or speed porter, on top of the rail underneath the modules, just like you have it on the regular dome system,
Yeah.
if that
Okay.
was the
Thanks.
question.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
And sorry to put you on the
yeah.
spot, maybe,
No,
but
that's okay.
do you know if there's a maximum height for this gravel as
Yes,
well
7.
before it recommends as well? Okay, so
It
7
is
is the
7.
maximum as
You
well. Yeah.
cannot you cannot type in more than 7 centimeters in base.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
maximum. Well, it's in millimeters there, but 70 millimeters is the maximum height you can add in base because it's not realistic anymore. Higher, you would be putting the gravel on top of the module.
Yeah. Okay. And then those cases, you have the other options of the more PE plates or the extra stones or the um.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But that's up
Super.
to
Thank you.
you. Base is only, and that's very important to know. We will get to this point later, but I can tell you already now, base is calculating the extra ballast. If you have 5 kilo as an extra ballast, which is needed, but you are using 20 kilo stones and you place another stone, then you of course have more weight on the roof as well. Base as a program only calculates with the amount which is needed extra. And that's very important to know. So please be aware of if you need 5 kilos and you put 20 on every corner, you have 15 for each area too much, and that's
Yeah.
adding up. That's adding up for many module blocks. Depends on the size of the project anyways, but just so you know, there is a few things to look after before you start
Yeah.
planning that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question, Karen? I know that was a bit fast, but if not, I would yeah, I would maybe continue with base. So last week we have done a planning in the west side of Switzerland. We have a bit higher values here, and I will still continue with the same roof. So we're back in the game. What we had here is we had a higher snow load of 5.47 kilonewton per square meter. We're not going into this topic too much. We've done it last week with the LS version and with the regular classic version or the Express. Today we're more about how to visualize it, how it works with the PE and with the concrete blocks. So what I'm doing now is I'm just changing the roof back to 0 degrees. So we have no roof pitch. It's a flat roof. We have now a gravel roof. We just imagine we have a gravel roof in front of us. So what we have to do, and that's what Karen said as well, we will have to type in the roof type gravel, the roof material. If we leave it with bitumen, as we have it here, you will not get the option at the end to change to PE plates or concrete blocks. You won't even be able to change it. And we have a lot of calls for this. Why don't I have this opportunity? Why can I not change it to another system? And the main problem is that the roof material here was still on foil or bitumen in general. So what I'm doing now is changing from the bitumen roof to the gravel roof. And then you have the dumping height, which you have to type in. And this is very important, especially if you plan with the PE plate. The dumping height is giving you the equivalent on how much gravel is putting pressure on the PE plate, and therefore you get a certain value on weight as an equivalent. You will see it's written in the report. We can do this later, but just so you know already, 4 centimeters is calculated with the regular type of gravel. It's written even here. It's around 20 kilograms per PE plate. If it's 5 centimeter, which is also regular size, 50 millimeters we put in, we have 28 kilograms. And if we add it up to 6 centimeters, we are having, I think, 36 kilograms per square meter. I can show this here if we go a bit lower with 40 millimeters now. Going through the design, and we're going for the classic, for the regular one now, to make it for everyone easy and understandable. We're going to the results page. Don't worry about the overloaded components now. We have the regular classic system, but what we have here is the mounting system itself and the system type. Now that we typed in gravel or green roof, we did gravel, we can change between the regular classic system to the system with the PE plates or concrete blocks. I will start with the PE plates now, and you will see the structure as we saw it before in the assembly instruction. We have PE plates under every SD and peak, and then from time to time, we don't have a PE plate. So this is saving material costs, and this is in general saving work and time. That's why calculation is done that you only have to place PE plates where you need them, but sometimes even I'm pretty sure you will not need a PE plate in the center here, but to span it over, you might have to place one just for the span width of the basic rail. And the example with the red square and the number inside is right now here. We have 3.5 kilograms, which is missing on top of a PE plate. If there's a red square, that doesn't mean there's no weight. That's still underneath. The red square is still counted one PE plate or one concrete block, as we see later. So what's missing here is 0.5 and 3.5 kilograms. If we now have a higher dumping height, not 40 millimeters, we change it to 50 millimeters. And if you only have 40 millimeters on the roof, you can still push it together to have little hills, so you get 5 centimeters. It's a bit of a black zone, gray zone in between, but it works. If you have the 5 centimeters, you see now you will not need any additional ballast anymore. Plus, there are some PE plates removed. There was one here before, and I think somewhere else maybe, but this one is removed as you have more weight pushing on all the other ones around. That's why there's no ballast PE plate needed here anymore. I think that's clear so far. Let's change it to the concrete blocks. We put in the height of the gravel. If we are using concrete blocks, it's not very important, but it's still important. Usually you are allowed to place, just like the regular system, on top of the gravel. But what we recommend always to dig it in. We want to bury them into the gravel. If you have 5 centimeters and you have an 8 centimeter concrete block as an example, it's kind of like the stone is locked in between the gravel and it's fixated. So you don't need an additional fixation anymore. I can show you later if we type 5 degrees as a roof pitch in, you will not have any problems to build a system. You won't need anchors with 5 degrees, and you just place the concrete blocks inside the gravel. But as an example here, let's say we have a concrete block. We'll have, let's say 250 millimeters width, 250 millimeters long. It's a square. We have it on 80 millimeters height, and we put in 11 kilograms. That's the example. We have 11 kilogram stones, which means now we have to place on every spot, on every SD, and under every peak, at least one stone. Additionally, we need 16, 33, 7.5, and so on kilograms on the roof to set it down, to actually hold the system on the roof. If we now see, okay, the 11 kilograms, they're not enough, we have another option on using 21 kilogram stones. Just as an example, we can place the 21 kilograms. We still place them on every position. And while it's loading, I'm just explaining, we still place them on every position. And as you see here, we have green squares. That means 11 kilograms would be enough already here. But if we're now using the 21 kilograms, we would still have to place them everywhere. That means we have 10 kilograms on each of the spots already more on the roof than it's necessary. I mentioned that at the beginning. That's very important. It's not always good to use a very heavy ballast stone. It's not always the best option. Sometimes it's better to keep it on a low profile with for example, 11 kilograms. Now it was loading. You see, we have way less of the red squares and we only need a few more kilograms on these corners. But we have a lot of ballast which is not needed here. So what I wanted to say is sometimes it's better to go with a lower ballast and add more stones in between. So what the best way to do now would be 11 kilogram stone. Sometimes they even, if you have a 20 kilogram stone and a 10 kilogram stone, which is just half size, you would only need one more multi-monty concrete screw, and you can still add it next to it. So if we imagine now we are placing our concrete blocks underneath here and underneath here, we still have some space in between. Base, of course, is visualizing now there's not much space in between, but there is space in between, especially if you have, for example, a 300 millimeter times 200, or 300 times 150 and 300 times 300 for double the weight. So it's kind of like half block and full block, which is existing. That's why I'm talking about it. You can just use another multi-monty and place it right next to it. So if we have 11 kilograms here and we need 16 more, we can just place 2 more of the 11 kilograms instead of putting everywhere 20 or 21 kilograms. I hope that message was clear. Karen, can you just give me a little feedback if there's a question fitting to the topic right now before I continue?
No question about this topic, but maybe we could just add the difference between this picture and what you might usually see, because usually it's like a
Okay. With the classic
maybe
system, with the
yeah, maybe you
regular
could
one?
just yeah, maybe you
Yeah.
could just quickly discuss what the red means and what the green means and compare that to what we would usually see in the classic system.
So what you usually see in a classic system is still green squares. This is the classic system now with the numbers in it. And that's the kilogram which you would have to add. In the version of the concrete block, you always have one block as a green square. There's always one. And if it's red, you will have to put additional ballast. So you have to picture it as there's one block underneath and you would still have to put 13. If we have a 10 kilo block underneath, you will have to need on exactly this spot, you would have to need 23 kilograms. So if there's a red one with a number, that doesn't mean that's the only weight you have to place. It means there is one regular block, as you have everywhere on each position, plus the needed ballast, which is
Yeah.
additional.
Okay. And then that needed ballast, it is up to the planner or installer to choose how they would like to do that.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
What
And
base
maybe,
is
yeah.
calculating? And that's very important. Like that would be the next step, but I can always show you already now. I think it's a good point. Um, K2 base is putting in the bill of material the multi-monty concrete screws. You can find them here. That's what they look like. Kyron was showing them real. Um, and the amount is changing. Right now, we will need 67 con 60, 76 concrete, sorry, switching German English, 76 concrete screws. Um, yeah, if we have a higher ballast, we will need less additional ballast, and therefore we have less concrete screws, 48 now. Important to know is what base is calculating is not one additional concrete screw for each position. Base is calculating all the different values together and is dividing it by the amount of the concrete stone, like by the weight of the concrete stone. So important, if you right now have a weight stone of 20 kilograms, as we have it here, and we have 1, 2, 3, 20, around 40 kilograms, it would put two more concrete screws, which is obviously not enough because you would have to spread it out more. You would at least need four. This, if you place this stone a bit more to the left or to the right and you add one more 20 kilograms, then this one and this one can be counted together. That's with the 20 kilograms, it's already as you put enough weight. It doesn't mean if you have 0.5 here, you would have to place a 20 kilogram. You would have to move one of the stones a bit more towards this area and you place one more in between here. But two is still not enough, two concrete screws. You would have to need at least four for each corner to place one, two, three, four more blocks, and then you're safe. So just so you know, it's a bit of a calculation which is not the regular way. This is the weight what you have to place, but we cannot show or tell you how to place it if you would like to work with speed porter. Additional, if you still have always speed porter on the construction site and you just place a 10 kilogram stone up here, then of course you have maybe too many multi-monty concrete screws, but honestly, there's sales units and there's packing units, and you are always happy to have a few more on the construction side. So that's not the main problem. All right. Coming back, Karen, if is there a question? One more? I think there's many questions as I see. Um,
Uh,
I'll
yeah, but
just
I think
continue.
if you, yeah, I'll
Yeah,
type them. You continue on that because
yeah,
yeah, it's
I'll just
and
continue.
also I think a really good point there is though, like, yes, you do have to do probably a bit more manual calculation with this idea that we're doing. Um, but that's a good thing in this
Yeah,
case as well, because the other option would be we just put an extra multi-monty in for every block, and in this case you would end up with 20 or 19.5 extra kilos of material at four of the locations. And this roof,
exactly.
yeah, it's probably not too much, but imagine if you've got a half a megawatt project, like you're putting so much extra weight on the roof. And in this way, we've given you as the user a bit more flexibility on the options of what you can do. But yeah, I'll go
Exactly.
back and answer some questions, Roman.
So also people were ordering concrete blocks in the amount of multi-monty screws, which is obviously not the right amount. We had the calculation, we used to have that you will need to place on each of the additional ballast one more stone. Kyron said that just now we have a lot more ballast and therefore we would way overload the roof, which is not necessary at all. Okay, enough about the weight itself. Let's go back to the roof pitch. I'm typing in 5 degrees roof pitch now, which we all know usually we have to place anchor. Above 3 degrees, we would have to place anchor for the sliding. Usually we have the uplifting and the sliding forces. We explained it last week. We have the uplifting covered with the weight between 3 and 5 degrees, but the sliding is still there. That's why we need the anchor. If we now have concrete blocks and they're placed on the gravel, you have a way higher friction, and it's recommended to bury them into the gravel, and therefore they cannot slide down. The system cannot slide down, but that's the reason why you don't need anchors. You can just build it up on the roof without any trouble. You get a warning, which is a soft warning. The error is still occurring because I'm still on the classic system, not on the LS version. Will change later, but this is not an error. It's just a warning that one more ballast value exceeds, which means if there's a red square, every time a red square will come up, you will always see this value, that it's not overloaded, but it's exceeding the ballast. Plus, if you have the roof pitch higher than 3 degrees, then it's recommended to dig them in, to bury them into the gravel. So this is just a warning. It's not an error. Just don't get confused on this one here. Showing the same calculation with the LS version and maybe with a higher ballast value. So you can see the difference. Right now, there's no more error, but the message is still there. Pardon, this is, yeah, we have to, of course, type in that we don't want the regular LS. We want it with the concrete blocks, and we want 20 kilograms. Now you see everything is in order. The only message is that it's greater than 3 degrees, the roof pitch. You might want to bury it in. Higher than 5, it's necessary to bury it in. So you can even build higher than 5 degrees, but we always recommend to bury it in if it's more than 3 degrees. That's our recommendation to you. Up to 5, it's possible without, but that's just a warning, so you know. All right. You see now all the squares are green. No more additional ballast needed. So the other message from before is not here anymore either. Let's make it a bit smaller for the calculation. I'm just downloading one report so you see how that looks, because this is also important to read. Changing it a bit up, smaller. Let's go for the concrete block. 10 degrees, 10 kilogram. And we'll go to the summary. If I generate the report now, I will show you where to find the information, which is very important for the aligning with the structure of the building itself. This is what you know. I didn't even print all of it out, the information about the project. Right now, you only have the layout. You see it's written Dome 6 on concrete blocks. This is the same. But what's important now, you see the red squares with the additional ballast is in the report. You see as a white square, we have a ballast of 10 kilograms. This is what you typed in. Means every white square plus underneath the red squares is one white square, which is 10 kilogram stone. And you will have to add more ballast here. But what's very important now is the specific load table. We all know that. We all have to see sometimes we have not a very strong static of the building itself. So we want to know how much weight is it really. Right now with the 10 kilogram stones, we really know exactly how much weight we need. And what we have is 26 kilograms per square meter. If I'm changing now to let's do 22 kilogram stones. We still have them everywhere. We still need additional ballast, but on some spots, I'm sure we have more weight on the roof than it's needed. And if we generate the report now again, and open it again, you will see from the 26 kilograms per square meter, we already added up to 28 because we have more ballast on the roof, which we don't need. And this is why I really mentioned that be careful on what you plan and how you plan. If it's not always better to put the heavier stone on the roof because you will have to add them everywhere. If you have 2 or 3 different types of stones on the construction site, which usually not many people have, then they will need to have the same height. And this is the important fact. If they're the same height, then the weight doesn't change much. Then you can build always with the same weight here. And if you have, for example, we have the 22 kilograms, it's written here, then, and you have 10 kilograms extra, you can just add the 10 kilograms on these ones, so you don't have to place them. Important fact is that the height of the stone has to be the same. All right, last thing I want to show, underneath the specific load table, you always have the information about the stone, total number of required stones, same as you see here, the additional ballast in the table. So right now here we need 51 kilograms. That's why with the 22 kilogram stones, we will have in the bill of materials 3 more multi-monty screws. This is how it's calculated, but as I said, be careful about this. We will do one more printout with the PE plates. It's looking exactly the same as we have it in the assembly instruction. If I generate one more report, you can see the setup itself. Nothing changes until here. And then this looks kind of the same as with the concrete blocks. You can see directly that it's PE plates because there is a PE plate missing on this spot, which we wouldn't have on a concrete block. The ballast is 28 kilograms, and it's not because there's stones. It's because if you're going underneath the specific load table, it shows you PE plates. This is the dimension of the PE plate, and with the specific weight, which is the equivalent. And usually, if you have printed out the information about the roof, you would see how high or how the dumping height of the gravel itself. And then this is changing this value. If you have now, we have here 5 kilograms, sorry, 5 centimeters. That's why we have 28 kilograms. If we would have a dumping height of 6, each PE plate would be an equivalent of 36 kilograms. And this is what would be written here. So if we need now 2.5 and 2.5, we can even cut a PE plate in half because one PE plate is an equivalent of 28. If we cut them in half, we have 14 and 14. You place one half here, and you have the additional ballast. Some people do. It's a bit more work, but sometimes it's worth it if you have many of the situations where you need to place more ballast. All right, now, Karen, I think I've talked a lot.
Yes, I think so too.
Help me out.
I um, I'm done with most of the questions, but I did just have one question for you as well, because I know you've covered this topic before and I've heard you speak about it. Usually with the gravel roof as well, you'll have a membrane coating underneath or a bitumen coating underneath. Is there anything that needs to be done in order to protect that when using one or two of these options?
No, there could be bitumen, there could be cover of a PVC, there could be many different options underneath the gravel.
Yeah.
I know from some customers they use like fleece. Is it called a fleece? Like a very thin layer of
like yeah,
it's not
fleece. It's
it's
fleece.
fleece, I think, yeah.
Yeah, a
Uh,
cotton of
a
natural
cotton,
occurring material. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, some people use that underneath the stones, especially if you don't if you bury them in. If you place them on top of the gravel, then there's nothing else to think of. But some people like to do it. And personally, I don't think if you make space for the stone to dig it in, to bury that, then why not just placing one of the fleece underneath the stone if you have that the material is not expensive. and it's just making sure that nothing happens. But usually we never had troubles with that. Um, yeah, I think that's about it. What I
Yeah.
can say to
Okay.
that. One more
Okay.
thing, one more fact I forgot.
Yeah.
The maximum height of concrete blocks is
Yeah.
250 millimeters. So it's a 25 centimeter stone. Obviously, the more space you get in between the surface of the roof and the bottom part of your module, it's getting higher if you put a 25 centimeter stone, but you will also need more ballast. There is a value which is calculated in, it's a factor. So the higher you go, and I think it starts from 120 millimeters. So if your stone is higher than 12 centimeter, you will get higher ballast values. Just to keep that in mind too. But as Karen said that before, if you are having a green roof and you want to place this system, the higher you go, the better it is. And sometimes it's worth it.
Yeah. And just to maybe have a visual note of that as well. This is the height we're talking about here. So on this case, right now, what you see, imagine there's no ballast at all. It's just sitting on the roof. Generally, the ballast will be 5 to 10 centimeters, which will sit sort of up here. You don't have that much height between here and the module, but you can raise it up further if you need to, if you had higher, thicker module blocks, ballast blocks. But then as Roman saying, and Roman, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is included in the calculation of base as well.
Base will
That
include it, yeah. So
Yeah, as
that's
you
why I
raise it up.
said it.
Yeah.
If in case you're getting confused, you have a 10 centimeter block and you say, hey, nice, it's fitting, the roof is strong enough. And you say, okay, now I want to put a 250 millimeter stone on it. And now you get way higher ballast values. That's the reason why, because there's a factor calculated on top. You get more wind underneath, so you will need more support to hold it down.
Yeah. Yeah, but and that's just something you can play with as you're using it as well, because it's, as you said, with the green roof, it's sometimes a wish, and if the building's capable of holding it, well, then why not? There were two more topics that came up as well. I think we could quickly discuss. So anchoring, and what we use for anchoring with the standard flat roof system is not so much of a topic here, in the sense that if it is not a new build, the installation of anchors can be quite tedious. You have to do even more work around the ballast or the green roof. But also, part of the system is what we use with the Solmont for mostly our German customers, or CB Lundberg or Nicholson, is generally speaking only 3 centimeters. So we're 3 centimeters off the roof. And in this case, if we're fixing to the roof, we're already raising up to 10, 15, 20 centimeters. And the anchoring changes drastically in this concept as well. So some situations there may be certain solutions that are possible, but generally speaking, the anchoring of what we would say traditionally use isn't possible for this setup. We had one other questions about the pressure exerted onto the flat roof itself. So this is also something that's a little bit different. I don't think it's calculated as well or shown as well with this system that we've shown today as the usual flat roof system. But if you are planning on an insulated roof, where usually you might only have 4 kPa pressure on that roof, there is a section of the standard base report which shows you exactly how much force is being exerted from the mat S onto the roof itself. And this is shown in pascals. It's I think the only section in the report that's shown in pascals. And you can get that information directly from that. We will cover that, or we have covered that in our sort of flat roof webinars, and I think we will cover it a lot more on the 31st. We're going to do a webinar where we're talking about pressure on modules and pressure on the roof and how we deal with that. So that topic we'll cover a little bit more. And then there was also a question about, can we work a little bit backwards and say, hey, I have a roof that can only require or only withstand, let's say 25 kilograms per square meter. In this case, we don't have a solution that works in this sort of backwards function. You have to go through base from the sort of the beginning. You put in your load requirements, your modules, your layout that you want, and then at the end you can see how many kilograms per square meter it is. It's actually shown in kilonewtons per square meter, but you can find you can convert that quite easily to kilograms per square meter or vice versa. If it's too high, so maybe in the example I had before, you've got 30 or 35 and you need a 25. In situations like this, you might have to use an anchoring system. So again, I said that's not really for this setup here, but just sort of a standard flat roof setup. You might have to use an anchoring setup, or you might have to change from if you want to use an S-dome system, you might have to change and use an east-west system, because the east-west system is usually has better aerodynamics and is able to withstand, or it doesn't need as much ballast for the same wind requirements, because obviously you can't change your wind requirements in this situation. But generally speaking, sorry, not generally speaking. Sometimes also it may be just one area of the roof that this is occurring. So maybe you just can't place modules there, but the rest of the roof as a whole is able to withstand this, this 25 or 30 kilograms per square meter. We just have a questions as well that have just popped up, and I think I've answered those two. So yes, there's a comment about the green roof and the gravel roof being planned with the express system. So yes, this is possible. So our standard solution, just not what we spoke about today, but our standard solution with the Mat S, this can be placed directly on the gravel roof and the green roof. Okay, so with the gravel roof and the green roof, this is also possible, but for the express and the classic system, it can also lie directly on the roof. However, then you do have to plan with the ballast as you usually do. And with the green roof, for example, it is usually a spongy material. So you might end up with situations where the mats are sinking into the green roof. So from our side, it's possible, but it may not be possible from the product of the roof itself. So just keep that in mind. So I think I think we've lost Roman, which is a bit unfortunate, but that might mean it's time to wrap up. I just saw a question pop up as well. So the questions that popped up, we can contact, we'll be in contact later. That's no problem at all. So from our side then, we're very, thank you all for joining today. We're running a bit over time, but we know that an hour out of your day is a lot, so we appreciate that. We will quickly pop up a little poll, which hopefully, again, you will fill out because it provides us with a bit more information, and next time we can hopefully present a better webinar for you. But other than that, we are pretty much done. So as I said, thanks for joining. Next week, I think we're doing trapezoidal roofing. If you're interested in signing up, I'm just looking I'm just trying to get some answers. Tile roofs. Okay, next week we're going through tile roofs. So if you're interested, please sign up for that. We'd love to see you. If not, we hope that today has been met what you were looking for. And we, as I said before, we appreciate any feedback. So we will hang around a little bit, but the cameras will turn off. And from our side, the webinar is pretty much closed. Again, thank you, and hope to see you again sometime in the future. Goodbye.